It all started the day the homeroom teacher needed to send someone to the old wing of the school to get some paperwork. No one wanted to go there, and that was no surprise. Strange rumors circulated about that wing. They said it had been closed before we were born, that there had been a fire there, that someone had disappeared right in the middle of class. But the most terrifying thing was that even the teachers didn't like to mention it, as if afraid to say too much. It was my lot to go there. The principal gave me a key, and the sound of its bell in the empty hallway seemed deafening. The closer I got to the locked door of the old wing, the more distinctly I smelled the damp and rotten smell. On the door itself hung a sign with peeling letters, Wing 3, no entry. I inserted the key. The lock gave way too easily, as if someone had been there recently. Beyond the door stretched a long corridor, narrow as a shaft with a ceiling like a devil's head. The walls were covered in gray plaster, peeling in places, blackened with soot in others. The light bulbs hung crookedly, and half of them weren't even lit. Every step I took echoed, and I had the feeling I wasn't alone, as if someone were mimicking my movements, a split second delayed. At first, it seemed empty, but the further I went, the more odd things I noticed. In some classrooms, the groups were arranged in a circle, as if someone had gathered for a discussion. Chalkboards still bore the inscriptions, "Wait until the bell, don't get up." Verbally, the students had left in a hurry and never survived. Then I heard a whisper, barely audible, as if coming from behind the wall, or perhaps, usually, from the floor itself. Children's voices. They sang in unison, but their words were muffled, as if they were speaking through water. I opened the door to room 39. Inside, the smell of burning was strongest. The ceiling was sooty. The windows were boarded up, and in the storage room, someone had drawn huge eyes with charcoal. Old notebooks lay on one of the shelves. I took the upper hand, and instantly my hands went cold. The first page contained only 2 words, "They will return." I flipped through the pages. The pages were blank, except for one where my name was written in bold letters. I froze, my heart pounding in my temples. I wanted to put the notebook back, but the door slammed shut. At that moment, all the parts began to move with an eerie creaking sound, lining up in neat rows. The air became heavy and damp, and I realized I wasn't alone in the room. At first, there were only shadows. They appeared at the edges of my vision, pale, sluggish, almost transparent. But then they grew denser. Children sat at desks in strict school uniforms with gray faces and empty eyes. They didn't move, only stared at me. And then a tall man in a dusty jacket appeared. His face was blurry, as if someone had erased it with photographs. He held a long pointer in his hand. Slowly, very slowly, he tapped it on the board. The board, blank a moment ago, spoke the words of its own accord, "Sit down." The lesson continues. I approached the door, but the sides closed in, blocking my way. The children's voices spoke in chorus, louder and louder. Now I saw in the report, no one left. No one is leaving. No one is leaving. I closed my eyes and rushed forward, pushing aside the nearest desk. She collapsed, hitting the floor, and the silhouettes of the crash twitched as if in pain. At that very moment, the door swung open. I ran into the hallway and ran until I emerged at the wing's exit. I grabbed the key, slammed the heavy door, and turned the lock. It immediately became quiet inside. Nothing happened. But the worst thing happened next. The next day, I returned to school, and in our regular classroom where we studied, someone had written on the blackboard in white chalk, "Sit down, you." No one admitted to doing it. The teacher erased the words, but I noticed her hand was shaking. I tried to forget everything that had happened, but with each passing day, it got worse. First, I began seeing silhouettes from the windows, pale children's figures sitting at desks. Then I noticed that sometimes, when the bell rang, my phone would schedule the next lesson. It was called Lesson 7, Wing 3, and at night, I dreamed of children with empty eyes. They sat and waited, and the faceless teacher tapped a pointer on the board and repeated, "The lesson continues." I woke up in a cold sweat, but there were chalk marks on my pillow. Now I realize I shouldn't have closed the door to the old wing. It didn't stop them. On the contrary, it was after that they came to me. Every day, I hear someone quietly whispering nearby, repeating the same phrase, "No one leaves." And the worst thing is, one morning I opened my diary and saw a new subject, posthumous internship. And opposite it was my name, written in someone else's hand.